Hi, this is Lainey Cameron, and today I'm here with Eddy Boudel, who wrote one of my favorite books in recent years, After Elias. Hey, Eddy.
Hey, Lainey.
So,
How
where are you joining me from today?
I'm joining you from beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia, here on the West Coast. We've had a pretty nice fall over the last few days, but it's cloudy and overcast right now, so I'm kind of cozying up indoors.
That's kind of my image of Vancouver is cloudy and overcast, which is probably not fair.
It's not inaccurate, I'll tell you that.
So this book, when I wrote my own review, I think I started with a line that said, "I adored this book, just adored it." You did so many things that, as a writer, I was in awe of. I mean, you set a mood, you dealt with some difficult topics. It was uplifting, it was inspiring, it brought in other cultures. I could go on all day, but why don't you talk to me about After Elias?
Yeah, and thank you so much, Lainey, for the beautiful words. I read your review and I just found your review so moving, and that's exactly what I wanted to achieve with this book is to connect with readers in the way that the book connected with you. So just thank you for sharing that and expressing it in such a beautiful way. So After Elias is the story of a pilot's last words before he flies an airplane into the sea a week before his wedding day. Sounds very tragic, and it follows the fiance who's left behind as he struggles to confront the aftermath of this tragic event. And the story is really all about what it comes down to is it comes down to the fear of losing everything. And that was the inspiration of the story. I wanted to tell a story about the fear of losing everything. And it's something that I've always struggled with in my personal life. This feeling of no matter how far I get ahead in life, no matter how much I achieve, I always feel like I'm one misstep from losing everything, and that's essentially what the story is about. It sounds very tragic. It sounds very heartbreaking, but there is a lot of hope and a lot of lightness and a lot of inspiration along the way as well.
Let's look at one review because the reviews are just beautiful. And this is by Timothy Taylor, who, let me get this right, he's a Giller Prize nominated author, right?
Oh, I was just going to say, for those who don't know, the Giller Prize is basically the top literary prize up here in Canada. So he is a Canadian author, and his one of his first novels, Stanley Park, was nominated or shortlisted for the Giller Prize.
It's fabulous. So it's a really big thing when you get a review like from someone like this for a book, a debut novel. And I just thought he nailed it. Utterly engrossing throughout. That was exactly my experience of this book. And Cohen is a hero for our era, darkly struggling amid the aftershocks of loss and doing so with dignity, humanity, and passion. And I just felt like I was on this journey with Cohen throughout this book. That was one of the things I said in my own review. I felt like I was on a
Yes.
journey. I was discovering things as he was discovering them, which was, I was immersed. It was a really immersive experience reading this book.
I'm so happy to hear that because that's exactly what I wanted to achieve. One of the biggest decisions before I started writing this book was the point of view and the perspective that I wanted to tell the story in. And there are a lot of opinions about using third person, limited versus omniscient versus first person. People have preferences, and I ultimately chose a first person point of view because I really wanted the reader to get into Cohen's head and heart. So everything that you see, everything that you encounter throughout the story, you're seeing through his eyes, and it's being filtered through his own experiences, and it's tinted based on that. And that's really what I wanted to achieve. Is I wanted you as the reader to feel like you're going on this journey with Cohen. So everything that he learns along the way, you're also learning along the way with him. His friends were often the voice of reason too, right? Because as Cohen is he's just wrestling with what to do, like what does one do? What is the right thing to do in a situation like this? Because he's on the Mexican island where the wedding's meant to take place. It's supposed to happen in a number of days, and then he loses Elias in a plane crash. And what he decides to do ultimately is to stay on the island and insist on proceeding with the event and having all of his friends and family come to the island, not to celebrate the wedding, but to celebrate Elias's life as something of a memorial. But of course, his friends and family are kind of the voice of reason, right? Like they were telling him, no, like maybe that's not the right way of dealing with this. What I wanted to achieve with the story is for the reader to empathize with how Cohen is struggling, right, with what to do and how to do it, but then also struggling with, accepting the feedback and the opinions of all the people around him, and I think his friends and family were a good way to kind of balance out the different perspectives. One of the biggest decisions before I started writing this book was the point of view and the perspective that I wanted to tell the story in. And there are a lot of opinions about using third person, limited versus omniscient versus first person. People have preferences, and I ultimately chose a first person point of view because I really wanted the reader to get into Cohen's head and heart. So everything that you see, everything that you encounter throughout the story, you're seeing through his eyes and is being filtered through his own experiences, and it's tinted based on that. And that's really what I wanted to achieve. Is I wanted you as the reader to feel like you're going on this journey with Cohen. So everything that he learns along the way, you're also learning along the way with him.
And it's also a bit of a mystery, right? Because Cohen is the fiance that's left behind, and he's trying to work out the whole time what really happened. Like, this plane goes down. Did Elias deliberately bring the plane down with 300 odd people on it, or was it? He doesn't know. And I think that that's something I could really relate to. Is like, you're questioning this person that you loved, but they're not there to talk to anymore. And how do you work through those emotions? And hopefully I didn't tell anything that's not in the book blurb. All of that happens pretty early in the book, right?
Yeah, you didn't give anything away. There are a lot of surprises, and you did not give away any of the surprises.
Yeah,
so
and that's the thing. It kept surprising me. This book kept surprising me again and again. It's a bit of a mystery as well, right?
It is, yeah. And those are the types of stories that I love to read. I love stories that have an element of mystery. You go into reading a book with certain expectations and a certain idea of what you're getting yourself into, and then you realize that it's not quite exactly what you'd imagine. There are surprises along the way, and that's really what I wanted to achieve with this book. So there is an element of mystery in it, and I think one of the important themes of the story is this question about how well we actually know each other. So Cohen, who's the fiance, he, not only is he confronting this tragic event and trying to deal with his own grief and losing his fiance, but he begins to question how much and how well he actually knew about his fiance and their life together, which I think is something that a lot of people can relate to.
Yeah, I think you achieved it really well.
Thank
Was
you.
there anything that changed? Like, we both know that the interesting thing is books change as they get edited. So in this scenario, is there anything that changed in this book along the way that a reader might not guess?
Yeah, a couple of things. You know what? The overall structure of the story has kept pretty true to the original draft in the way it was structured. So the story unfolds both forward and backwards from this one pivotal event, which is the plane crash that claims Elias's life. But there are some things that had evolved as I was writing it. I think one major thing that did change was Cohen's parents were meant to play a bigger role in the original story. And for those of you who read the story, you'll see that his parents are there, but they play a smaller role than what I had originally intended. And the reason that I did that was because I really wanted to focus on a smaller number of key relationships rather than spread myself too thinly. So you'll see that we dive a lot more deeply into the relationship that he has with Elias, of course, but then also his brother Clark, and his closest friends, Vivi and Decker Lee. And that is one thing that I do want to say is that often when I tell people about what my book is about, or when I hear about how people respond to the premise of the story, the natural reaction is, oh my gosh, that sounds depressing and really traumatic. And in a lot of ways it is, right? Like, I don't want to shy away from the very serious themes of the story around grief and trauma and tragedy. But one thing that I want readers to know is that it's not entirely grim. It was very important to me to tell a story that had moments of lightness and levity. And that was actually one of the hardest things about writing this book, I think, is striking the right tone so that it wasn't all doom and gloom, but it was also not trivializing these really serious topics and introducing moments of lightness in ways that were genuine and authentic. because just like life, right? Like life is never perfect and joyful all the time, nor is it tragic and grim all of the time. There are moments of pain and moments of joy and everything in between. And I wanted my story to reflect that, all the good and the bad and the ugly.
So have you had any time to read as you're busy launching your own novel here?
I'm forcing time. I'm making time. It's important, really important to me.
Anything good recently?
Yeah, I actually have a stack of books right beside me, but I somewhat recently, so one memorable book that I read somewhat recently is Costa Alegre by
Mhm.
Courtney Mom. I read that over the summer and it has really stuck with me. It's one of those books that I find myself thinking about every so often. It's set in the jungles of Mexico at the very early days of the Second World War, and it focuses on this colony of sorts of artists and provocative thinkers as they flee the war to create their own community. And much of it really spoke to me. And the book that I'm going to be reading next, which I'm very excited about, is A
Ooh,
Door Between Us by Asane Satter. And I'm
I
really excited
love
for this
that book.
one.
Before we wrap up, any advice you'd give to people who are earlier in their writing career, maybe who aspire to be published like you? Like, what would you say?
Read a lot, just like how we just kind of spoke to. It's easy to feel like you just don't have time to do it because you're likely juggling a million things at once while also trying to write a book and find agent representation and get published. But it's so important to read and also to read widely. And that's something that I've really been making a priority recently is reading outside of my comfort zone, exposing myself to a really diverse range of literature and authors. And I think that's really essential for every writer to, not just hone their craft, but also to expand their perspectives.
So before I show folks how they can connect with you, any last thoughts before we wrap up?
I really encourage you to pick up the book. It's called After Elias. It's a story of tragedy and heartbreak, but also hope and humanity. And if you do decide to read it, I hope you like it.
So if folks want to connect with you, I know you love to hear from readers. Eddy Automatic on Instagram or Eddy Boudel 10.
Yes,
And
and I promise that I won't just post, 1,000 pictures of my book cover. I'm trying to dial down the book promo, but yeah, please follow me on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook.
so thanks for joining me, Eddy. And yeah, folks, go get the book. It is, like I said, one of my favorite reads in recent years. It's amazing. I'll put a link to my review in the post so people can find it as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lainey. Thanks for having me.